cradle-to-career work is important simply because it gives us a chance to do something that we've not been able to do in a long time, which is to focus at every developmental stage on children and not lose them along the way. That is the opportunity in terms of our practice. Too often we're focusing at one particular developmental stage and still getting frustrated when we keep looking at the numbers as the children grow up or whatever, right? So that's why this is cradle-to-career work is important. At the national level, here's Promise Neighborhoods is structured this way. We would consider ourselves an intermediary or a backbone organization. And our job is to make sure that our system, actually at the national level, it works and keeps the pressure off of sites. So that system looks like the Promise Neighborhoods Institute, which is comprised of PolicyLink, the Center for the Study of Social Policy, and the Harlem Children's Zone. We work as a partnership to do our work. The U.S. Department of Education and the Annie E. Casey Foundation. So we all are involved in some way in either technical assistance, policy work, or something. So we actually meet very regularly. And the reason we meet monthly is because we believe that parallel systems are at play. When our system is not in high action, high alignment, I guarantee you it's playing out on the ground. So that means we've got to be in relationship around our guidance, and the Urban Institute is in this as well. About our guidance, about the point of view about technical assistance that I laid out. And you can imagine how me talking about this point of view does not jive with a lot of the ways intermediaries nationally provide technical assistance. We can't have that out there. So at the national level, it's us as partners figuring out how do we do our convenings in alignment, how do we do any webinars, technical assistance approaches, et cetera, that are all in alignment and we're all agreeing. So even if we're out there dealing with sites at different times, they're getting that same message. Then at the local level, what you will have is usually a strong community-based organization. There are some universities that are doing this well, like Hayward is really good at this, and Berea College. But that's usually not the strength of a college to do this type of work. And they're serving in that backbone function. When I talk about the backbone function, we're talking about an institution or a group of institutions that are responsible for like guiding the vision and mission, making sure that they're the activities are lined up, that are thinking about the technical assistance, who are thinking about policy implications, and who are helping to attract investment to the work. And so that's what's going on. So say, for example, in Minneapolis, the Northside Achievement Zone would be the backbone there. They probably work with about 20 to 30 partners who are on that cradle-to-career continuum somewhere, and each partner can tell you what their contribution is and how many children that they have. So if you wanted to see a place where they have the best articulated cradle-to-career system, they can tell you the conditions, like that quality standard that's needed by every nonprofit at every developmental stage to participate. They can tell you that. And they've also begun to attract investment to that work that way. So most recently, Target and General Mills gave them $6 million per year for the next 3 years. And about 2.5 of that goes to the backbone, and the rest goes to the nonprofits. So it's an exciting example of how they're partnering and creating a market for results, quite frankly. People are seeing something very different happening and they're capitalizing it. General Mills and Target had never funded any of the organizations individually at that level. So to see them come together and see the grants usually range around $100,000 a year. That's a big increase for folks. But it came because of this work. So that's how you see it playing out. So no matter where you go, you're going to see focus on 10 results and 15 indicators. Maybe they have some extra ones. And you will then see them organized in radically different ways. Berea, Kentucky looks probably different from the rest, 700 square miles. So they've got to come up with a lot of different, they work with the Lions, Kiwanis, Rotaries, and others because they don't have a deep nonprofit infrastructure. So you'll see them look very differently. So what we've seen is to go where the bad outcomes are. That's going to take you to some places. And then to always know, and this is why the right mix of solutions are so important, that if you are working in a place that has really bad outcomes and you're bringing a systems and policy perspective, you will start changing systems by just doing that. So for example, in Minneapolis, the former school superintendent said, you know what, I'm no longer going to start kicking out little black and brown kids. The stop before that happens is my office. Change the system overnight. You see my point? So simple things started happening. The folks on the north side of Minneapolis start saying in our promised neighborhoods, you know, here's the big problem. If kids aren't in school, I can't do my job. And they're being kicked out for willful defiance at 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, whatever. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, you know, unless we're going to solve that, so they went to the superintendent. She did something about it. The system change rests with her ability to make that decision. So that is a powerful example. Now in Indianola, Mississippi, what they decided to do, they realized that their whole population is 10,000, so it's a scale that is manageable. What they realized is that they really did need to work countywide. And they are working, they started off very small to perfect their programmatic solutions, and then they started working very countywide around early learning policy. So that's what they're doing. So I think when you start in a place, it's going to tell you some things about what you should do. And this is John Powell's targeted universalism, right? The things that you're doing for that population are going to benefit to the broader population if you're doing the right work. You're going to improve systems for everyone. So I would say I would not get fixated on it. I would let my data walk poster be my deal, be my tiebreaker. Where does the data tell us we need to go? And then let's just hold this interest of anything that we're doing is in service of population level accountability, right? And so that's always the North Star. That will get you back. Because sometimes you get down the rabbit hole of focusing in a place and you can never get out of it. So focus on that. But when you put the number on it, that will help you keep it at the right level. Establish that strong results framework and move on. And you can really do that pretty quickly, especially if you're listening to the voices of families instead of nonprofits. Doesn't mean that you don't listen to nonprofits, but if I'm trying to land that, I really need to be overemphasizing family, community members versus nonprofits, because if I set this up with nonprofits, we start walking away from the results too quickly. So I'm always going to load my meetings with community folks, because those are the folks we say we're serving, so you won't get scared in that meeting because they'll push you, right? So if you want to think about how to start structuring a different container, start with families who are feeling the pain. They will force everybody to perform better. Does that make sense? If you start with the same usual suspects, I guarantee you will, at that table, you will start thinking about all the reasons why. Well, the superintendent won't do this, and the city council member won't do that, and before you know it, you've devolved into this very small slither of something. Does that make sense? So always lead with that, what we would say at PolicyLink, that voice, wisdom, and experience of community, because that's why we came to the work in the first place. Have that strong results framework. Then, when it comes to cradle-to-career work, you should be able to articulate the supply chain at every developmental stage. So I should be able to come into a community, and if I said, draw for me the early learning network in San Mateo County or in a particular city, folks should be able to do that, because until they can, you actually don't have a system that is going to be efficient and effective. It still could be working reasonably well, right? But if you want to get it better, you got to be able to articulate the system, and that means you got to make some choices about who's in and who's out of that cradle-to-career system. And I can show you some places that really have a great standard of selecting who's in and who's out based on quality performance, not just arbitrary politics. But you got to be able to articulate that standard at the cradle-to-career system at every developmental stage. You got to focus on population level impact. You got to figure out where are those places that you can provide infrastructure that will allow people to ramp on and ramp off and not spend years trying to do stuff that just doesn't make sense. It's in service of a result, but it's not the thing that people are going to really care about. It's important to focus on that collaboration is not a result. It is not, folks. It's something that people like to do for some reason, but it's not a result. And so for me, being driven by the results framework drives everything. And let me give you a good example of what I mean here. The price of admission in the Promised Neighborhoods container is you don't come through that door if you don't own a result and an indicator. You just don't. We don't care if you are a funder or a business leader or a nonprofit or a parent, because if you do, it just means I have another personality to manage that doesn't own anything. And I'm sure you all know plenty of people who can come to your meeting and get that meeting twisted around because they're charismatic. They'll drop something in the room and everybody's fixated on that, and before you know it, you're out investigating something else for 5 months, right? And so you got to remember that every personality you got to manage. So the price of admission to our work, since we are doing results-based work, is that you got to own a contribution. And the reason why this is so important, because it also starts shifting the power dynamics. I was in Cleveland a year ago, and I was at a typical community meeting where they were feeding folks and they were just going to report out to them. And Case Western was doing a phenomenal job of really presenting some really bad data on how their children were performing. And the parents were sitting there, and I was watching this, and the parents were sitting there, and one of the ladies raised her hand and said, what should we do? So helpless. so powerless. And this was a white person, so I understood why they were not taking this on in this environment. So I raised my hand and said, excuse me, can I just ask a question? So I asked the woman, I said, why did you just give all your power away? Like, these are your kids, you're coming to this community meeting, and you mean to tell me there's nothing you can do in your house to help them? And what I was trying to signal to her is stop coming to these meetings acting like you're powerless. You are a partner in solving this problem. And that little bitty tweak was important for her. The structural problem was she was being invited without ever being asked to do anything. So you think about that for a moment. These are your kids. They're spending more time in your house than most other places. And you're coming to a meeting about them. The academics are bad and no one's ever asked you, all these nonprofits in the room, and no one's ever asked you, when you come to these meetings, can you at least tell me how many times a week you're reading to them? Does that make sense? So when we talk about results-based accountability, that's why it's so important. Now, if she had to act it out, they actually wouldn't have had a space to hold that energy. You see my point? She could have acted out on a variety. She may not have liked the way the presenter talked, or she might have gotten triggered by something else. All of those things may have been valid, but without a focus on results, you have no way to bring it back. Does that make sense? And so I share that example of why we expect that everybody owns something. It's also a way of really doing powerful community engagement. So for us, we don't believe in talking about community engagement because I don't know why people have to read a book to know how to talk to folks. I don't understand that. You know, I don't think any of us has to go and learn about, when we want to engage folks, we don't have to go read about them. Poor folks are not exotic. They're not strange. If you're in relationship with them and you're doing the right work, you don't have a problem engaging them. Does that make sense? And so there's this whole cottage industry who acts like community engagement is this special thing when you're dealing with these communities. I just totally disagree with that because it's not how you and I behave. It doesn't mean you don't have to know context and nuance and all that, but you know what? I can engage a family around something because you know what? They're asking for help. They want things to change in their community. So if we're focused on results, it's not like I'm having to bring in something new. It's not like the majority of folks are sitting there not wanting to contribute in the first place. So what I'm telling you is that the leaders have to be skilled at beautifully aligning everybody's contribution. That is our job. And when we can't do it, and when our container is weak, that's when you start seeing all this other stuff play out that has nothing to do with results. And then the last thing here is you got to be willing to support schools in ways that they need it. Having people run to the school and hitting a principal up with 20 new programs is not helping them. You've got to be able to listen and figure out how to support that district in achieving those academic measures in a way that works for the district. And in some cases, you might have to push a little, but that's okay. But you got to start by listening and understanding their business and the stresses that are on them and bringing your point of view about how community feels about that as well. But it doesn't start with the way we do it right now, which is we just bombard these principles with everything under the sun and we ask them to integrate it all. And it doesn't work. And so one of the best gifts we've learned is to stop doing that, get in alignment about the results that principals and teachers and superintendents really care about, and then we see the work accelerate. And then they have no problem taking folks in because what they want are folks to be able to support what's going on in the academic day and the non-school hours. So that's what we've learned, and that's what's been happening.